Hi, true avatars, and welcome back to your queer video game podcast. This is episode 12, and I am your host, Zoey Wild. I am a transgender, bisexual woman who loves video games so much that I can just not shut up about them. My pronouns are she, her. So, this week will be a little different than usual since it's just me. My schedule for recording this week was a little tighter than usual, and I was pretty busy, so I couldn't find a guest who was able to record with me on short notice, plus on my weird schedule, so again, just me. That's okay though, because today I really want to ramble and vent about this week's topic, which is quite the topic, and I'm sure you can guess, but it's the Game Awards 2024. So for anyone who doesn't know, the Game Awards are like the Oscars for video games. If the Oscars were a 3.5-hour commercial for upcoming releases with a heavy share of corporate industry propaganda, with only a few awards thrown in really quickly between everything, and even fewer speeches for about half those awards, which are usually cut off before the winners are even done speaking. Are you with me so far? I also generally think Geoff Keighley, who's the host and the creator, is an awful person, who's much more interested in shiny toys than actually doing anything to improve the industry he claims to be a part of. It's also heavily lacking in queer representation, and unfortunately, this year is no different. That said, from an entertainment perspective, only an entertainment perspective, by the way, this year was a pretty great show. And there was a little bit of queer representation, but honestly not enough. I am titling this episode The Game Awards, with a cheeky little Y in game, but there wasn't really enough queerness to justify that. What can I say? I'm weak and I love a good pun. I'm sorry. But the other thing that I think is important to mention, when any queerish game was up for an award, it generally lost, and I'll be noting that. So, for the format today, I'm going to cover everything that happened in the order that it happened, and only cover some of the notable awards and queer award snubs. At the end of the podcast, I'll quickly go through all the awards and their winners and share any final thoughts. Okay, I lied. I'm actually not going to cover everything. I'll be skipping anything related to anti-queer developers and games, insofar as I could research a studio or game's treatment of the queer community. There were also a shitload, and I mean a shitload, of generic male-led action games with guns, swords, or both, and I just won't be covering a lot of them. Even if I wanted to, this podcast would take all day to listen to if I did. So, let's jump right into my take on this 3.5-hour show. So, the first cool thing that happened is that this year they didn't just get a random Muppet that felt unrelated to the Game Awards. They actually got Statler and Waldorf to do a commentary. They showed up 4 times throughout the show, I was counting, and which I think wasn't enough, honestly. And when they were on screen, I think they went a little long in the tooth. But what they did say was pretty funny. They criticized all the things that fans say online about the Game Awards, but then the Game Awards didn't actually do anything to address those problems. It seemed like they thought if they made jokes about the problems, they could get away with continuing to do it, which I thought was kind of scummy, honestly. But it was really nice seeing Statler and Waldorf actually make some jokes. And honestly, the way they phrased them were pretty funny. There was one joke about Kojima that was just so good. One of them said, "Did you know that Geoff and Kojima are friends?" And the other one replied, "Yes, I did, actually. Does Kojima know that?" And then it cut to Kojima kind of awkwardly smiling like there's some truth to that. Like that Geoff Keighley and Kojima have a one-sided parasocial relationship, maybe. Anyway, I'm not really selling this very well, so I won't spoil too many of the other jokes if you want to go back and watch the live stream. I recommend doing that too if you just want a good 3.5 hours of entertainment. Plus, you can skip through the trailers you're not interested in watching it in retrospect. So, anyway, let's get into it. And again, this is going to be a lot of game announcements because that's what the show is. It's E3 in the winter. So the first game that was announced was called One Move Away, and it's like this first-person packing game. It looks like unpacking in first person, where you're actually moving around the environment, except instead of unpacking, you're actually doing the packing. And I think maybe it's in VR. I couldn't get a good firm answer on this because it looks like a VR game, but the Steam page doesn't mention VR. So I'm a little confused. I mean, I guess it could just be a first-person game, but I think it'd be a little, I don't know, it didn't look like it was smooth to play without VR. I don't know. Anyway, the dev is called Ramage Games. I did look up to see more information about them, but I couldn't find anything, especially not their stance on queer developers and the queer community. But it is apparently set for a late 2025 release. Next up was the first award, League of Legends wins Best Esports Game. And then the next reveal that I thought was very interesting was this game called Shadow Labyrinth. So I don't know how to explain it. It was like this weird 2D action platformer, but it was a Pac-Man game. So basically, bear with me here, because if you haven't seen the trailer, I don't know how to explain this without sounding completely weird, because even watching the trailer, I was like, what am I watching? Anyway, so Pac-Man is this giant demon entity thing that controls a human who's trying to escape a maze. Like I said, it's really, really weird. And Pac-Man World 2 died for this, so I don't know how to feel about it, but it does look pretty cool. And apparently the secret level episode for Pac-Man that just, I think it just came out, is a tie-in to this. So for anyone who doesn't know, Secret Level is this animated anthology series. I think it's on Amazon Prime. And each episode has a unique vision based on a popular video game series. So the Pac-Man one is just as weird as this game looks. So apparently it's some kind of tie-in. But even so, even if you think this looks cool, just like note that it's made by Bandai Namco, who are also trying to lay off a bunch of their staff by putting them in isolated rooms and giving them nothing to do. So, weigh your options there playing it. And I do think it was set for 2025, but no firm date beyond that. But pre-orders have gone up, so I feel like this is probably coming sooner rather than later. The next thing that was announced was Games for Impact, the award, and it went to Neva, which I wasn't surprised about. Neva is a very popular game. It's from the people who made Grace. It's another platforming game if you don't know it. I think it's actually pronounced Gree, but I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, Neva won. And as much as I would have liked to see Life is Strange win for its queer representation, even though I didn't really like the game otherwise, I really thought it was going to go to Tales of Kinzera Zao, because the dev who made it was on stage at the show this year. He was on stage last year to introduce the game and talk about its inspiration. And also, I feel like I thought Tales of Kinzera Zao did more for that category than Neva did. I didn't play Neva, but it's basically just like a game about a wolf. I played some of Tales of Kinzera Zao, and it's got a really meaningful story about someone getting over the death of their father. It's got amazing black representation in it. So I thought for sure this game was a shoo-in, because it actually is doing something interesting and not just remaking a developer's previous game. Plus, the game also came from a brand new developer, too. So anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox for that. But the next award was Innovation and Accessibility, which went to Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Some queer games were snubbed, or queer-ish games, I would say. Dragon Age: The Veilguard and Star Wars Outlaws were games that were nominated and didn't win. But it seems to me, based on the accessibility features Prince of Persia had, that this was a good winner. And I haven't played Prince of Persia yet, but I heard it's a great game. Can't speak for queerness in it. I don't think it's got much representation in it. But at least it is doing what the award is supposed to be for. So that's great. Astrobot won the next award, which was Best Family Game. And it was at this point where I said Astrobot's probably going to win Game of the Year. And anyway, as you'll see later, I was right. I'm sure if you haven't read on the internet, I'm going to spoil the end of the show. But yes, Astrobot won. So again, we had another game reveal, which was a game called Rematch, which is basically this soccer game that plays like Rocket League does, except instead of cars, there's people. And I'm sure you're thinking, Zoey, Rocket League is soccer with cars instead of people. So they're just putting the humans back in, and that's basically what they're doing. It's got like goal explosions and all that stuff. It doesn't look top down like FIFA. It looks like from the perspective of the car. Like it's like a third person, like from behind, like over the shoulder kind of view of the game. Like Rocket League and less like FIFA basically. And the devs is called Slow Clap. And they developed Sifu last, so it's quite a bit of a departure from their last game, but Slow Clap has been previously supportive of the queer community. I did look up and I found a LinkedIn post celebrating Pride, which admittedly is all I could find, but it's better than searching for the devs on Google and immediately finding an article about the lead developer being a raging transphobe or a misogynist, which was like half the games I looked up and half the devs I looked up. So, like I said, we got to take the wins where we can find them. Next up was the award for Best Performance, and it went to Melina Juergens for Hellblade 2. So congrats to Melina. I'm happy for her, but there were a bunch of actors from games with queer characters who were also up for awards. Most notably was Hannah Tell, who played Max in Life is Strange: Double Exposure, and Max is famously a bisexual woman, and Hannah Tell did not win. Again, I'm not really speaking for performance here. It would have just been nice to see some queer representation win every once in a while. I didn't play Hellblade 2. I know it's a very popular game, a very meaningful game. So I'm not trying to downplay that at all. I just wish there was a little bit more queerness in the awards. Playing Life is Strange: Double Exposure, I didn't think Hannah Tell's performance was like a particular standout. It was good. Like, I'm not going to say it was bad or it wasn't worthy of winning or whatever, but I do think it was definitely worth considering. So I'm glad she was nominated is all I'll say. Other queer leading games with actors who were up for nominations was Umberly Gonzalez from Star Wars Outlaws and Brianna White from Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So like I said, I just feel like there's been a lot of snubs. I didn't play Hellblade, so. And next up was a really, really exciting reveal. So this trailer came up and it started off really creepy with this like woman taking a bath while her father talks about her growing up. It wasn't what he said. It was kind of how he said it. And I did realize later that I was right in feeling creeped out by this because that was kind of the point of the trailer. But it was a trailer for Witcher 4. So Ciri showed up to help this girl in the trailer. And I won't spoil too much about the trailer anyway. It was a long cutscene basically. And I think there was some gameplay in there. There were a lot of trailers and I'm not 100% sure, but I think there was a bit of gameplay in there, or at least there was like cutscene of a boss fight, probably from early in the game. But anyway, so it's nice to see a female lead, that it's not a man in the lead this time. And it does seem to have some interesting commentary, at least in the trailer they showed, on religion and the treatment of women. And then next up was a new FromSoft game, and it was not Elden Ring 2, but it was basically Elden Ring, like an Elden Ring spin-off. It was called Elden Ring Night Rain. It was a co-op action-adventure game, and to be honest, I couldn't tell if it was Souls-like. Souls games aren't really my jam, so I didn't look too much into it, but I do recommend that if you're interested in Elden Ring, Souls-like games, or just co-op action-adventure games, to go check this out. It looked pretty cool. Not my cup of tea, though. Next up was Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, is coming to PC on January 23rd. A bit of a surprise, but not entirely unexpected because we knew it would be coming eventually. Still no announcement for other consoles, particularly Xbox. Obviously, it's not going to come to Switch, but I do think there is going to be some kind of announcement for Final Fantasy VII Remake, at least, on the Switch too. I'd be surprised if it wasn't coming to Switch because people spend a lot of money and time on JRPGs on the Switch, so it would be a missed opportunity, especially with Rebirth sales being so low. This game coming to more people can only be a good thing, and it's an amazing game, by the way. It was nominated for Game of the Year, and it didn't win, but it was almost as deserving as Astrobot, I feel. Like, almost every game in the category was, like, so deserving of its nomination. So highly recommend going to check out Rebirth. It's so much longer than Remake, though, so keep that in mind. Next up was this really weird, creepy-looking trailer that was almost entirely pink for this cat game called Catly. And maybe I'm just, like, slow on the uptake, basically. But I was watching this trailer and my partner said, like, oh, this looks really weird. Like, it looks like there's something off about all the cats in this trailer. And I was kind of thrown off by the fact that the cat was pink. I didn't notice that it was all AI generated. I guess, like, some part of me clued into the fact that something was off about it. But I couldn't put my finger on it. And I'm a little ashamed to say that I didn't clock that it was AI. My partner did later. But, yeah, it looks kind of gross, and I recommend going to play literally any other cat game than this. I don't even think they showed any gameplay. I think it was just an AI-generated trailer about cats and clothing, maybe? I don't know. I couldn't even get a read on what the game really was. I think it was just supposed to look cute and get people interested. And I mean, Geoff Keighley must have gotten a lot of money for this one, so it's probably why it was in the show, but I'm a little disappointed in him for even accepting this. Because even if it wasn't AI generated, I couldn't get a read on what this was supposed to be, and I probably wouldn't even be interested in the first place. But adding on the AI stuff, it just throw the whole thing out, you know? Start a new game. Next up was Path of Exile 2. It's getting an early access shadow drop, it seems. And the first game does have a couple of queer characters, so maybe this one will too. Gen Design, so the Shadow of Colossus, Ico, I can't remember their third game's name, but they came back to the awards with a reveal for their next game. I'll be honest, I don't even think there was a title for it. I think it was just like Gen Design's next game. And all they really showed was like maybe a 1 to 2 minute scene of someone climbing into the head of a giant mech as the head rockets off the body and pulling out part of the spine. It was gross and creepy and cool all at the same time. And then the head, which is like launching off into space, kind of gets obliterated by an oncoming explosion. It looked really cool. It looked more like Shadow of the Colossus than... I remember the title. It was called The Last Guardian. It looks more like Shadow of the Colossus than The Last Guardian. So I'm sure that will give some people some faith. I heard The Last Guardian was a bit buggy and not as strong of a game as Shadow of the Colossus. But what I played of Shadow of the Colossus was amazing. I loved it. despite the fact that I had a friend basically corner me at a party and make me play it in front of everyone, was a lot of pressure, and I kept messing up, trying to make this really weird jump, I think on the third Colossus. So that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth, not for the game so much as just the experience of being forced to play it. So I haven't gone back to it since, but my other memory of that game is that I did enjoy what I played up until that jump moment and being forced to play. So I'm excited for this. There's no date, no platforms. If I had to guess, this is probably years away, considering the studio takes a long time on each of their games. So I guess we get more when we get more. Next up, Civ 7 is coming February 2025. I don't know if we already knew that or not. I don't follow the Civ series. But the reveal after that was probably one of the coolest ones of the show. So Hazelight, the devs that made It Takes Two, are coming out with this game called Split Fiction, which looks fucking awesome. So it's a game about two women, and this is really distilling the story down to like its bare components. And I do recommend looking up more because I think it's really cool and worth looking into the trailer, which was really a deep dive into the game. But basically, it's a game about two women who are trying to get their stories turned into virtual playable worlds, I think. But something goes wrong, and they get sucked into their own stories, and they're fighting corporate overlords, who I think are trying to actually steal the stories for themselves and kick them out. And their own worlds are trying to kill them while they're doing it. So these two women, one of them is named Zoey, by the way, which I thought was pretty cool. So my partner and I are going to play it. I'm going to play as Zoey. But it's a co-op game as you work together with you and another player to escape the game worlds. And I think you alternate between, like, one's a sci-fi world and one's a fantasy world, and you alternate between them as you go. And assumedly there's going to be story in there as each character kind of like acknowledges the fact that they created the world. So it's just like It Takes Two, gameplay-wise, with like co-op and everything. But I do hope there's a better message at the end of the game this time. It's coming out March 6th. It's not a full price game. It's $64.99 Canadian, which is $15 less than our full price, which is $80. So I have to assume in the US it's probably about $49.99. And it has baby dragons that you can raise into full-size dragons. So if you weren't sold yet, you should be sold now. And if you're still not sold, then you don't enjoy cute things. Sorry. And then next up, Geoff Keighley finally addressed layoffs in a really, really, really half-assed way. Because little victories, I guess. It wasn't meaningful. Honestly, it almost would have been better if he hadn't said anything. But he did it because they gave out an award called the Game Changer Award. So the Game Changer Award went to Amir Satvat's games community. So Amir Satvat helps people find jobs after layoffs. So he's got this community of jobs postings and resources. He's placed almost 3,000 people in jobs at no charge to himself or anyone else. I shouldn't say at no charge to himself. He might have spent money running this website, but he's not charging the people who are trying to find work. The entire room gave him a standing ovation. But like I said, Geoff Keighley was just kind of like, yeah, there's been layoffs. Anyway, here's the award. So again, I really don't like Geoff Keighley. I really, really don't like Geoff Keighley. I don't like any of the podcasts that platform Geoff Keighley. I don't care that he's Canadian. Like, he likes to brag about that. And I think I like to support other Canadians, especially in the creative industry, where like, I feel like American creators kind of underplay when developers or creators come from other countries. So it is nice to see some Canadian representation, even though I'm not very patriotic about Canada, especially right now. But anyway, yeah, fuck Geoff Keighley. I'm just going to say it. Fuck Geoff Keighley. I know I'm platforming his show right now and I'm a hypocrite and like whatever, but there are other things that are worth talking about from the show. So I do think that makes it kind of worth talking about. But anyway, so this guy, Amir Satvat, he seemed like a really down-to-earth person when he came up on the show, on the stage. He did actually address the number of layoffs that have happened in the last few years, which was 34,000. He gave a really kind speech. It was moving. But I did see something on the internet, and again, I haven't verified this because I couldn't. But apparently he might actually work for Tencent. For anyone who doesn't know, Tencent is like the scourge of the game development world. Like, they're just a huge studio that puts out mostly crap. And I'm sure they've been part of the layoffs too. I'm not 100% sure if they have, but if he does work for Tencent, it's actually very problematic. So I do recommend, before taking everything I just said here at face value, take it at face value and do your own research. The story is still developing, but I do think the takeaway from this is that layoffs were addressed at the Game Awards after years of not basically ignoring it and basically saying like, yeah, the game industry is doing really well right now. There are absolutely no problems whatsoever. So little victories, I guess. Next up, speaking of Canadians, there was a Canadian game revealed called Black Frost: The Long Dark 2. I haven't played The Long Dark, but this game, it really intrigued me because it looks like The Last of Us if it was a painting. And it comes from a developer called Hinterland. And I did look it up, and they have a queer inclusive statement on their page, on their website. So Canadians that celebrate queer people and hire them and are generally queer inclusive, we'd like to see that. And sorry, I know this podcast is a bit long in the tooth in the sense that I'm just kind of listing off everything that happened, but realistically speaking, that's most of the takeaways. There was just so much in this show, and it was such it was very overstimulating. It was just like so much being thrown at you constantly, awards, announcements, some more awards maybe, and then more announcements. But the next announcement was queer. Borderlands 4 got a trailer. The previous games are known for including lots of queer characters. The game has a 2025 release date, but I haven't played Borderlands. I also didn't go see the terrible movie that came out this year, or supposedly terrible. I can't verify that it was terrible because I didn't see it, but didn't get great reviews, and fans said it wasn't very faithful to the story of the games. And if I had to hazard a guess, it probably didn't include that many queer characters, if at all. But again, I'm assuming. So go check out the trailer if this is something that interests you. The most anticipated game was a no contest award to GTA 6. Ghost of Yotei never stood a chance, unfortunately. But in my heart, that's the most anticipated queer game for next year. Another queer game actually did win an award, Best Community Support for Baldur's Gate 3. And then Arcane Season 2, which is also has some queer characters, was highlighted with a musical tribute, featuring Royal and the Serpent, David, 21 Pilots, and the TGA Orchestra. RGG Studios then showed up and showed off two games that are coming out. The first was Virtua Fighter, which was just like a 1v1 fight that was shown off. But unfortunately, I found it really gross that the last part of the fight was like a slow-mo punch of this man punching a woman in the face, and then it cut away, and then there was like everyone in the audience clapping, and it just left a really bad taste in my mouth. I feel like it could have been a man versus man fighting, or like the woman could have gotten the upper hand to win the fight. Again, I don't really know who the characters are and if there's like history there or anything. It just, if they were trying to get new people interested in the series, especially women interested in the series, that didn't work. But maybe they're targeting men and they're targeting their audiences, men who want to beat the crap out of women. I don't know. I think that's terrible if that's the case, but like, who knows? The game industry is so fucked up right now that like, I would believe that. But the next game, despite me being like kind of crapping all over RGG Studios, the next game looks pretty interesting, which they didn't really say much about. They kind of showed it off. It looked like you're walking around like this Japanese city in the year 1915, and maybe you're beating some people up. It's a third-person game. Again, they didn't really say much, but I think it was set in Hiroshima. At least that's what my partner and I thought, based on deduced from what we've seen of Hiroshima, what we know of Hiroshima. It looked like, if I had to hazard a guess, it looked like Hiroshima in their entertainment district in 1915. And if for anyone who doesn't know, the entertainment district is right where the bomb went off in 1945. So if it is set in Hiroshima pre-World War II, it would be very, very cool to be able to walk around that city before the bomb went off in a time of prosperity. There was one shot of what looked like the government building where the bomb, like the building that the bomb was directly above when it went off. Wasn't sure. I did search to see where the game was set, and as far as I could tell, nobody knows. And I could be completely off base. It could just be a generic Japanese city. It could be a specific one, but that's different. I don't know. But if this game is set in Hiroshima and it's tastefully done, it's something I'm going to be playing because I think that would be really, really cool to walk around Hiroshima at a time of prosperity before the bomb went off, before all the suffering. So that'd be really cool to see, especially the research that would have to go into crafting something like that. So, and next up is the obligatory Hideo Kojima coming on stage. He came up to introduce the award for Best Direction. He gave a long speech before he actually introduced the award, but he didn't reveal an experimental game at the end of it all, which was nice. So, and then he revealed that Astrobot won for Best Direction. So at that point, I was like, yeah, Astrobot is definitely winning all the awards today. Next up, Turok Origins was revealed. So a new Turok game. I don't have much to say. I've never played Turok. I know that it was big on the N64 for a hot minute. I think it's also been a while since the last one. I can't I did look up to see when all the games were released, and it looks like the last one came out in 2008. So this is like a return, I guess. Maybe there's been other ones, smaller ones in between that I couldn't find. I honestly did just use the Wikipedia to reference the game releases. So who knows? But it looked cool, I guess. Not really my cup of tea though. But there was a cool trailer, so if you are interested, go check that out. They dropped a Helldivers 2, they shadow dropped a Helldivers 2 update. Warframe 1999 is it launched the day after the TGAs. I think there's queer characters in the game, or at least there is in a different version of Warframe. To be honest, when they got up on stage, I'm pretty sure they said like, we don't know what our game is, and they left it at that. They didn't really explain what it was because they said they weren't sure, and they said that as a joke, obviously. But I'll be honest, if they wanted to get new people into Warframe, I have zero idea what the game is about. And looking it up, I mean, what I saw didn't intrigue me enough for me to like research more. But if there are queer characters in this, that's really cool. I hope there is. Yacht Club Games, who are known for the Shovel Knight series, they introduced the best debut, and I'm saying debut with emphasis there because there are 2 indie game awards, but best debut indie game award, and Balatro won. The developer, who's just one guy, goes by Local Thunk. He didn't show up, but he did send others to accept the award and highlight other indie games, which they didn't actually do in their speech. They just talked about Balatro, so I'm not sure what the point of that was. But he didn't want to show up to take away from other indie games. It sounded like was the point, but the way they worded it, it sounded like they were going to like actually highlight other indie games in the speech, and they didn't really do that. So, and then next up was Best Action Adventure Game, and I'm sure you can figure it out by now, but Astrobot won that. Best RPG went to Metaphor, not Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but honestly, RPGs had a great year this year. I can't blame Metaphor for winning. I haven't played it yet. It looks great, but I'm waiting for the Game of the Year edition, like the complete version they do with all the extra content and DLC. That'll probably be on Switch too, to be honest, which is my favorite. Like, Nintendo's my favorite console series to collect for. So I'll probably be waiting for the physical of that before I play. Plus, it'll be significantly discounted at a time when there's so much to play. This game called Hunt Showdown, which admittedly I've never heard of before in my life, but they showed up and with some Post Malone's Murder Circus event. You heard that right. Post Malone's Murder Circus. It's as weird as it sounds. It looks like a murder circus, and Post Malone is involved somehow. I didn't see him in the trailer, but I wasn't looking closely enough because his name showed up after the fact. But apparently the game has gay and non-binary characters, which is why I'm highlighting it here. But again, I've just told you everything I know, so you're going to have to do your own research on this one. But if you're into Hunt Showdown, cool. There's some new content for a game that has gay and non-binary characters. Next up was Squid Game on Netflix. Like a Squid Game game, I should say. Like a video game, like a multiplayer party royale. I'll admit, I'm a bit tired of Squid Game at this point. It's been so long since the first season. And I'm honestly not sure where the story can go in the series. But the game looks really fun. Basically like a multiplayer party royale is what they called it. Specifically, I'm not calling it that. That's what they called it. But it basically looks like playing Squid Game with your friends online. So if you're into that, sounds cool. I'm going to give it a try for sure. Best ongoing game went to Helldivers 2. There was a lot of hype for that game this year, so I'm not too surprised about that. The Overcooked devs showed up to show off their new game, and they're called Ghost Town Games. It's called Stage Fright. It's a 2-player co-op adventure game with aliens. It was compared to It Takes Two. It had a really fun reveal where the game characters were like sitting in a theater, and then they kind of like projected them to show up on stage after, and they then showed off the trailer. There was no release date either, so I'm always skeptical of anything that doesn't have a set release date. It doesn't sound like it's coming next year. I think if they knew it was coming next year, they would reveal that. Granted, it could still come out next year in 2025, but I'm doubtful. And next up was this cool trailer for this game that looked like a Game of Thrones ripoff. Like, I was about to shit all over this trailer. I was making notes for the podcast. I was like, wow, this another like medieval wintry looking game. Looks like they're stealing from Game of Thrones. Why can't we just have a nice Game of Thrones game? And then Kit Harington showed up on screen, and it was like literally just a Game of Thrones game. Like, it actually is a Game of Thrones game called Game of Thrones King's Road. And like, I thought we were watching gameplay that looked really, really cool. Like basically playing through an episode of Game of Thrones. You can choose one of 3 classes. You can be a knight, a sellsword, or an assassin. I was like, yes, I'm into this. This is so cool. It's coming 2025. there were no platforms listed. I'm like, okay, that's not that out of the question, especially with Switch 2 coming out next year. No one wants to list consoles and platforms because, they might want to announce for Switch 2, but they don't want to spoil that. And listing everything but Switch, people go, oh, well, is it coming? And then I looked it up, and it's a fucking mobile game. And I'm so disappointed. And that's not to say I don't like mobile games. I just thought we were looking at a AAA Game of Thrones game. And I'm just very sad because I think a AAA Game of Thrones game would be super cool because you could do all kinds of stuff with a Game of Thrones game that isn't just fighting too. Like there's so much like drama and you could make it a strategy game if you wanted to. There's so much you could do with the Game of Thrones story in a game and like gameplay and all these other things. Anyway, I'm just disappointed it's a mobile game, especially since I guess what they showed wasn't gameplay because there's no way what they showed was running on a phone or you'd be able to play on a phone because it seemed too complicated. So they didn't, as far as I could tell, didn't show any of the mobile gameplay. And if that was mobile gameplay, I have even more questions. So who knows? But anyway, next up, some actual queer news is that The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered is coming to PC. It's coming on April 3rd, 2025. So if you don't have a PS4 or PS5 to play Last of Us Part 2, either the original version or the remastered version, please pick it up on PC or Steam Deck. It is an amazing game. Do not listen to the haters online, and I can't tell you why you can't listen to them because it's a spoiler. But I promise you that if you go in with the love of the first game, lower your expectations if you read into the first game in a way that you shouldn't have. And again, I can't spoil why, but I highly recommend checking this game out. It is one of my favorite games of all time, behind like Tears of the Kingdom and Pokemon Crystal. Like it's up there. Best adaptation went to Fallout. I know Fallout, I'm not sure about the show being queer, but I know the games are queer, or at least have some queer representation. But Jonathan Nolan came up to give a speech, and he did hint at Fallout New Vegas. So what he said was, I want to thank fans of Fallout New Vegas for not burning my house to the ground. You'll be very happy you didn't. And then he didn't elaborate further, but I would assume that Fallout New Vegas is going to have some kind of tie-in in the next season, which is currently in production and due out sometime late next year or early 2026. That's not actually confirmed. I was just reading some speculation online about when it could come out. I think 2026 is more likely. Oh, and in case you're wondering, they did not show a trailer for the new season after this. They just did the speech and they moved on. Okay, thanks everyone for bearing with me so far. We are getting towards the end of this, but there are still a few more things I want to highlight. So 10 Chambers Collective, founded by Ulf Anderson, creator of Payday, is making a new game called Den of Wolves. And as per their hiring careers page statement, they are queer friendly. So no idea if the game is queer friendly, but at least the staff are going to be queer, which is cool. Some of them anyway. So that's good. Snoop Dogg performed a new song on stage. Best score in music went to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. The composer went up on stage and then basically advertised the PC port of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth instead of really talking about it. He also didn't thank Nobuo Uematsu, which I thought was kind of weird and disappointing because most of the music in the game did originate from the original Final Fantasy VII, which was composed entirely by Nobuo Uematsu. So that was weird. It was a weird speech overall, but I'm glad Final Fantasy VII Rebirth won because my partner and I went to the 7 Rebirth concert this year and it was awesome. It was incredible. And the music in that game is just amazing. Like I've got the soundtrack on Apple Music. I listen to it constantly and Queen's Blood is the best track in the game. So if you're going to start with some music, go there. There was a new Sonic racing game announced called Sonic Racing Crossworlds. They just said coming soon when they revealed it. There was no date, not even a vague 2025. They didn't show much gameplay. They just showed Shadow racing his car towards a portal. And I'm wondering if it's inspired by this world-jumping portal mechanic from Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, where you're racing on one track and then boom, you're on a different track, which would be really cool for anyone who's like a fan of like Hot Wheels as a series, because I know there were some movies a couple decades ago that did this mechanic, at least on screen in like animation. So I think it'd be really cool to play a game like that. It's coming to PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series, Nintendo Switch, and Steam. And if I had to guess, it's probably also coming to Switch too. But they did not confirm that or announce it or even hint at it. There's a new Mafia game coming from Hangar 13, who are known for being queer inclusive. The game is called Mafia: The Old Country, which is a prequel set in the 1800s. So I really doubt a game set in the 1800s is going to have a lot of queer representation, if at all. But the game is coming summer 2025 from a queer inclusive dev. So be hyped for that. Balatro won Best Indie Game, not to be confused with Best Debut Indie Game, which it also won. Best Mobile Game, Balatro won. Pokemon TCG Pocket was nominated, but it did not win. Best audio design went to Hellblade 2. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was snubbed in my opinion, but maybe I'm just biased because I played Final Fantasy VII Rebirth all year, and it didn't have the same audio issues that Remake did, so it sounded better. Again, I didn't play Hellblade 2, but I understand why it won. Then they revealed Dispatch, which is this new superhero game, but it's not a superhero game like Spider-Man or Batman Arkham. You don't fight as heroes. You choose which ones to send to crime scenes. So it's a point-and-click strategy game, and the official summary from the Steam page is, Dispatch is a superhero workplace comedy where choices matter. Manage a dysfunctional team of misfit heroes and strategize who to send to emergencies around the city, all while balancing office politics, personal relationships, and your own quest to become a hero. So we know that it stars Aaron Paul from Breaking Bad, and it has Laura Bailey, who played Abby in The Last of Us, Part 2. It also has Jeffrey Wright, Aaron Yvette, Jacksepticeye, Moist Critical, Alana Pierce, Travis Willingham, Joel Haver, Lance Kansopoulos, Matthew Mercer, and Thought Squad. Some of those names I don't actually know, but there are some in there that I'm sure everyone knows, so it's kind of star-studded, and it seems like it's going to be really fun, and it comes from devs who made The Wolf of Us and Tales from the Borderlands, and it's coming in 2025 to PC and unspecified consoles. Best Narrative went to Metaphor. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth did not win. I have this feeling that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, or the remake as a whole, is probably going to win for its third part when it win for Game of the Year, the same way that Lord of the Rings, it didn't win until the trilogy was done at the Oscars. So I have this feeling that Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 is probably going to be the one that takes home most of the awards. Because Remake also didn't win either because it was up against The Last of Us. So it's just very competitive years that these games are coming out in. So, and who knows, maybe they will come out, the third part will come out on another competitive year and it won't win anything. But I do think that its best chance is when the whole story is done and released for everyone to experience. And then next up, Geoff Keighley started crying on stage. And he was like, this is a really cool thing we got for the Game Awards. Again, he seems really up his own ass a lot. But this was a really cool reveal. So they're making a sequel to Okami. Hideki Kamiya is directing. The director who's known, Hideki Kamiya is known for firing a raging transphobic actor from the Bayonetta series, for anyone who doesn't know. Production is about to begin, so it has not started yet. No platforms were listed. So I'm going to guess that this Okami sequel is not coming for a long time. Game development takes a long time now, especially much longer than it did when the first Okami came out. And to be honest, I don't even know how long the first Okami took in development. So this one's a while away. So maybe go play the original games first and while you're waiting. And then the final reveal of the show, which was a pretty big reveal, is that Naughty Dog revealed their new game. It's not Uncharted 5. It's not Last of Us Part 3. It's a whole new story called Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet. I could sit here and summarize the game, this reveal. I think it's a really cool looking game. It looks like Alien. It's got that 80s future aesthetic that Alien had and Blade Runner had. It's set in space. This woman goes to this planet that's basically abandoned and cut off from all the other planets in the galaxy. And she flies her spaceship onto this planet, and it seems like you're hunting for someone. And the game might have some survival elements because you have to survive this really rough terrain with aliens and stuff. Anyway, there wasn't a lot of gameplay in the trailer. It was mostly a cutscene. And to be honest, for some reason, the audio when I was watching the trailer reveal wasn't great. So I missed everything that was said from the person on the little screen talking to the main character. But Tati Gabrielle plays the lead character. There's a new score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross of Nine Inch Nails. And there is no release date. Maybe Sony wants to reveal this themselves in their own presentation early next year, and they want to be the one to drop the "it's coming this year" information. But I also think, given how long games take and the fact that Naughty Dog just canceled a huge multiplayer game, and they've also released The Last of Us Part 1 remake and The Last of Us Part 2 remastered, if I had to guess, this game is probably not coming in 2025, maybe 2026. I think there's a better chance that Wolverine is coming next year from PlayStation than this is coming. But who knows? It could be coming next year. I'm excited to play it either way. The little slice of gameplay that they did show, which again was very, very brief, looked pretty cool. And I'm always there for a new Naughty Dog game, so I hope this is good. And then the Game of the Year award was announced by Larian's Sven Vinky. He gave a great, great, great speech, an amazing speech about people making games for the love of making them, that gameplay comes first, and all that jazz. Go find it online. I highly recommend you watch it. He also talked about how whoever wins this award, their life is about to change. You don't know what's coming. It almost sounded a little ominous, that maybe everything that's coming isn't perfect. Like there's a lot of pressure to live up to, but also that it's exciting and you're going to be big now. And Astrobot won, of course. I thought most of the nominees deserved to win, as I mentioned earlier. I'm glad to see a platformer win, especially a game like Mario Odyssey didn't win, and it's just as good a game as Astrobot. But of course, Mario Odyssey was up against Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda, so it kind of makes sense why it didn't win. So it's nice to see a platformer win, and they indirectly thanked Nintendo in their speech, for basically creating the platformer. So that was really nice. They didn't mention Nintendo by name, but they did say that Super Mario Bros. They did hints at the NES. They said like a little gray box from the 80s. So it was very sweet to see them say to at least acknowledge their roots, especially from a company that's been competing with Nintendo and from a company that basically got shunned by Nintendo. So, because Nintendo was going to partner with Sony on the PlayStation, which the PlayStation was going to be an add-on for the Super Nintendo, like a disc drive add-on. So you could play disc games on a cartridge console. And then right as Nintendo went on stage in the 90s to announce this to a whole room of people, they said, oh, we're doing it with Philips instead. It didn't tell Sony at all. So Sony turned around and said, well, we can do this ourselves. And now PlayStation is Nintendo's biggest competitor. So they created their own demons, obviously, but it's nice to see this reference to the fact that Astrobot wouldn't exist without all these great Mario 3D platformers. And Astrobot is amazing, by the way. So despite who I thought should have won, I was, hoping for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth as well. But honestly, I was going to be happy with most of them, as long as it wasn't Black Myth Wukong or Elden Ring DLC, because I don't think a DLC should win, and I don't think misogynists should win either. And not necessarily in that respective order. But go play Astrobot. Seriously. I think it's on sale right now. Again, it's still almost a full price game, so I understand if you want to wait for a discount. It's not a very long game. I'm almost done it, and I've put about 17 hours in. So if you're one of those people that wants to wait for a discount and you want to get the best bang for your buck, I would definitely recommend waiting. Although PlayStation games take a lot longer to go down in price these days. I've talked about this on a previous podcast. They're taking the Nintendo/Disney approach of like really valuing their games and not lowering the price so soon after release, which is good because it says the people that made these games are worth paying, I guess, in a way. Like where Ubisoft lowers the game price within like 2 weeks of the game coming out, and it says like this game is not worth the value you've spent on it, even if it is. But anyway, that was the show. So the big reveals again at the end were Okami, Intergalactic, which is the new Naughty Dog IP, and the Game of the Year winner. So I do want to go through quickly the other awards. I'm just going to recap all of them and who won. I'm not going to go through all the nominees. I do just want to talk about them to platform all of them, and give them all kind of like a fair shake at being on the podcast. Because I don't want to just like, I do believe that this should be an awards show first. So if I'm not talking about all the winners, then who am I really? So I'm going to go in reverse order on the website because it starts with the biggest awards and then it goes down. So I'm going to start with Best Esports Team. So Best Esports Team went to T1. They play League of Legends. Best Esports Athlete went to someone called Faker. Best Esports Game went to League of Legends. I did mention that earlier, of course. Content Creator of the Year was someone named Queso or Casio. I don't know how to... I mean, I heard it on the show. I didn't go back to listen to hear the pronunciation. I'll be honest, I'm bringing up these categories specifically because there was only one woman nominated among all the people that are in these categories, and she didn't win. So we're a long way off from queer representation at the Game Awards, like I said in a previous podcast, if we can't even get cis women to be platformed properly. So, not good, honestly, not good. Most anticipated game was GTA 6. Best adaptation was Fallout. Helldivers 2 won Best Multiplayer. Best sports/racing game went to EA Sports FC 25. That's the series that used to be FIFA, but then they lost the license to the name, so now they're just continuing under a different name, but it's the same series. So it's really no surprise that it won. It's hugely popular. Frostpunk 2 won Best Sim/strategy game. Best Family went to Astrobot, which is normally the best Nintendo game category. And I do think, there's 3 out of 5 games from Nintendo games, so it's actually pretty impressive that Astrobot won. But to be honest, Nintendo's offering this year, while consistent and strong, was not nearly as... No one game was as strong as Astrobot, in my opinion. Not even the new Legend of Zelda game, which was nominated. Tekken 8 won Best Fighting Game. Metaphor ReFantagio won Best RPG. Astrobot won Best Action Adventure. Sometimes this goes to Nintendo as well. Last year it did. Tears of the Kingdom won last year. Black Myth Wukong won Best Action Game, which I think was one of its only wins. Batman Arkham Shadow won Best VR/AR Game. Balatro won Best Mobile Game. Balatro won Best Debut Indie Game. Balatro won Best Independent Game. You can see a trend here. Baldur's Gate 3 won Best Community Support, which makes sense considering there's still a major update coming out next year with new classes. Or new subclasses, I think. Best Ongoing Game went to Helldivers 2. Neva won Games for Impact. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown won for Best Innovation and Accessibility. Melina Juergens won Best Performance. Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 won Best Audio Design. Best Score and Music went to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Metaphor ReFantagio won Best Art Direction, which honestly makes sense. It's a pretty looking game. Metaphor ReFantagio also won Best Narrative. Astrobot won Best Game Direction. And Astrobot won Game of the Year. So that pretty much wraps up the show. I don't really have too many final thoughts to share that I didn't already share. It's just a lot to go through. I was going to do more research on each thing that I was talking about, but I would have been here for hours talking about everything. Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is, again, that the Game Awards are still basically E3 in the winter. I'm glad Astrobot won. I'm glad Black Myth Wukong basically took home nothing. I heard the devs wrote their speech 2 years in advance. Black Myth Wukong's devs wrote their speech 2 years in advance. So thinking they were going to win. So some nice salt in the wound. I'm a bit spiteful. I'm kind of a spiteful bitch. So some nice salt in the wound for being the most misogynistic game studio of the year, that we know of at least. And apparently as well, they were crying, according to Alana Pierce, who was sitting near them at the Game Awards. So that's pretty wild. I'm not happy that people cry. I'm almost never happy that people cry. But if you're going to be an awful person, don't expect your game to be rewarded, your work to be rewarded for being an awful person. That's all I really have to say, is that I'm glad it didn't win. And maybe these devs will learn from that and they'll hire more women and be less of a group of assholes about it. I think the game studios that treated their devs fairly and respectfully pretty much won across the board. I've heard that Astrobot, their developers were treated like royalty. I mean, every time the director went up on stage to talk, he said, this award also goes to every single one of you. You are also game directors. Even if that's just for show, at least it's better off than not walking the walk, not even talking the talk, which Black Myth Wukong, they treated their devs terribly, and we know that they did. At least Astrobot is, again, I don't know if they treated their devs fairly on Astrobot, but the game is amazing. It's full of love. It's full of passion. If I had to guess, they probably do walk the walk. So anyway, I could ramble forever about the Game Awards, so I'm going to wrap up the show now. Thank you for joining me for another episode of True Avatars, a queer video game podcast. If you've made it this far into the episode, I really appreciate you taking the time to support queer-made content. It's a big deal. It's been really fun working to bring this podcast to you. I always do my best to bring queer voices on every week to discuss what's relevant in video games. This week, I'm the only queer voice, but I am discussing what's relevant. I am discussing the lack of queer content and queer representation at the Game Awards. I hope next year is better. I sincerely hope it's better. But I'm also not that hopeful. But as of this week, I have some good news. The podcast now has a bunch of social media pages. So you can find the show on Instagram under True Avatars. Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, and YouTube have the handle @TrueAvatars, all one word. That's Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, and YouTube @TrueAvatars. We also have a Facebook page, or I say we, I also have a Facebook page for the show, which can be found by searching True Avatars, a queer video game podcast. Please ignore the fact that I've barely posted anything on these pages yet, and give the podcast a follow and a share if you can. Please, it would mean the world to me. Importantly, if you or anyone you know is queer and involved with video games in some way, please do not hesitate to reach out. I would really love to hear from more queer voices in video games. Your voice is unique and valid and worth sharing with the world. And if you don't want to be on the show, or you don't know anyone who's interested, but you know about a cool queer video game or a games industry story that's queer related, please let me know. The show's official email is trueavatars.podcast@gmail.com. That's trueavatars.podcast@gmail.com. You can also feel free to reach out via the aforementioned social media pages. Things are tough out there, and queer people need to stick together when we can. So, that's all for today's show. Bye, True Avatars. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to speaking with you all again next week. Take care and stay safe.